Hi, everyone. I think I'm on now. I think I had a false start there for a minute. And so, for those of you who, let's see, because I'm on both YouTube Live and I'm on here with the webinar. So, those of you who were on here with the webinar, I think you can hear and see me now. Hopefully, having a little technological issues this morning, which I tend to have from time to time. And then also, those of you on YouTube Live, yep, we're going to have to go back through some of the things I was talking about, but I think we're all together now. So for those of you who are on with me on the webinar, welcome. Sorry for the delay of figuring out how to get you online today, uh, but I think we're all together now. So we have a chat feature here that you can use to communicate with me. I would love for you to do that. So here, first of all, let me back up and start this again and say, hi, I'm Marco DiGeorge. I'm the co-founder and instructor at Truthful Acting Studios. We're an acting conservatory located in Orlando, Florida. And thank you so much for being here. And as I said, those of you who might be on YouTube Live with us, we might have to do a repeat of something I started to talk about just because there was a technological issue, which uh, as as I get older, I notice I'm having more technological issues. I don't know if anyone else has ever felt that, but I'm starting to feel that way. So we have chat features. Please chat with us and interact with us as we go through this. I love answering questions as we go through these online sessions. And today's session is one where I would love some interaction from you, and it's dealing with anxiety as an artist. And so I would love nothing more than to hear from you and maybe any anxiety that you feel, situations or questions you would have uh, dealing with that or navigating through it, either as an artist or as a human being. So yeah, so welcome. It's good to see you. Good to be here. Hopefully you can see me and hear me now. And yeah, if any of you are out there, go ahead and interact in the chat and just tell me that all is good at this point. So, okay, so kind of resetting a little bit, and I want to talk about today the topic of anxiety because it's something that so many people deal with. And more importantly, if you want to be an artist or an actor and you have anxiety in your life, meaning you have social anxiety, which is a pretty big form, or any other form of anxiety that stops you from doing things, well, we need to talk about that and realize that it's not something that's going to uh, it's not something that's going to stop you from being an artist. All right. So one of the things I want to discuss is let's talk briefly about what anxiety is, and then we can go into how we're going to deal with it and cope with it as an actor or any other form of artist. So the first thing is there's a huge difference between anxiety and stress, and sometimes we intermingle those two words together, and we say one when we mean the other. And many times we feel stress about something, but we will attribute it to anxiety, and it's really not the case. Because anxiety is something that we can navigate and deal with, and stress is something that we have to regulate, but they're completely different in their operations. So I just want to talk about the difference between the two real quick. And the first is anxiety is simply the feeling of fear. That's all that is. I'm going to type that in the chat too. Okay, so anxiety is simply the feeling of fear. And that's important to know because sometimes we feel like anxiety can be harmful to us, or it could be something that is really affecting our heart, or maybe it's affecting our muscles, or it's affecting our different systems. It's like, no, 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 that's stress. Anxiety is simply the feeling of fear. That's all it is. Anxiety is in the moment. It's short term. I know sometimes it feels longer term, but it's really short term. And anxiety comes on when we're afraid of something, when there is a perceived danger, and it goes away when the danger goes away. Okay, so anxiety comes on when there's a danger and it goes away when the danger is removed. So that's what anxiety is. Now, anxiety is also something that is known as it's a heightened state of awareness. Right? It's a heightened state of awareness. What does that mean? Well, it means we have our five senses, right? Touch, taste, smell, sight, hearing, right? We have our five senses that help us navigate the world around us. Well, as we're navigating the world around us, normally we can do that on a day-to-day basis and it's fine. But sometimes when there's a danger around, our senses need to be heightened to be aware of where the danger is so we can navigate away from it. That's what fear is. That's what anxiety is. Fear is simply your logical mind, which is your safety center. Your logical mind injects you with adrenaline. That adrenaline heightens the senses in your body, all five at once. And then you are feeling, right? You are feeling that heightened awareness. You're feeling your senses having an increased ability, which is why you shake, which is why you feel cold when you're anxious. But your sight gets better, more acute. Smelling, taste, hearing, all more acute for a short period of time. It's to help you then escape the danger that's around you. Now, sometimes in life we have real danger. There's something around us that is actually danger. If you're in the woods and are being chased by a wild animal, that's a real danger. And so all of your senses get heightened. You're able to navigate away from the danger, and then that resolves itself. So that is where that comes from, and that's what anxiety is. So the thing is, though, we have other situations in life where we feel fearful, but we don't have a rationale of why. Meaning there are situations where all of a sudden we have this anxiety come up and overwhelm us. We're feeling anxious, but we don't consciously know why we're feeling it or where it's coming from. And that's where we start feeling out of sorts a little bit. And typically it comes from something that is post-trauma, meaning there's trauma that happened to us in our past. Well, it could be a day in the past, it could be a week, a month, a year, or decades, but somewhere in our past, and then now we're processing it now. Our logical mind is saying, okay, we're safe to process this through, and we can deal with that. And if something recently has happened to you and you're feeling anxious, your body's still processing that. But it can also process things that happened in early childhood, or even in adolescence, in your teen years. If you're older, it can happen even in your 20s, and then as you get older, you're processing it later. But that's called post-trauma stress. That's where we process the feeling of everything after it happens. Because when it happened, when we deal with trauma, our body, our logical mind, has the ability to shut everything down. Meaning it shuts right here, right in our chest. It kind of like puts a block. And we block all of our feelings because our feelings come from our core. It's like our stomach area, which we usually call our gut or our solar plexus. It's down there. And so that's where our feeling center is, our emotional core. So anything we feel and we process comes up from there and then upward towards our head. And so we block it right here with extreme tension. And so the mind, your logical mind, has the ability to shut that down. It shuts down your feeling center, so then you can navigate through whatever danger is around you and escape it and get to the other side of it. So that's why it does that. But then later, you still need to process it out, because while it shuts it off, it doesn't mean you're not feeling. What it means is that you're still feeling, but you're going to store it to process later. That's what happens. It shuts down your ability to process the emotion, but you're still producing the emotion. You just don't realize you are. So it stores it. It stores it in your muscular system. Your muscular system is actually a storage system for emotions. It's fascinating. And so later on in life, whether it's weeks, months, years later, you start processing things out, you become anxious, and all of a sudden, as your body is, your mind really makes the decision. It's like, okay, now we're safe, we can process this old stuff out. It's like getting rid of all of the junk that's in our body that we've held on to. Well, as it starts processing it, you begin feeling the fear of that past moment. But you don't have any understanding why. It's simply stored emotion. That's all it is. But that stored emotion needs to be processed. And so as we process it, we feel out of sorts. We're feeling emotional, we feel anxious, we feel all of these things, and we have no idea why. So that's where anxiety comes in, where we feel out of sorts. Therapists will try to help guide us through that. Therapists are wonderful in helping guide through anxiety and anxious moments. And what they try to do is uncover the source of it and then allow you to work through it. Okay, so that's what anxiety is. Anxiety is the feeling of fear, a heightened sense of all of our 5 emotions. So as an artist, why is this important? Well, as an artist, it's actually necessary to have anxiety. It's necessary. As an artist, we never want to be on stage or in front of the camera calm. What I mean by calm, we want to be centered, we want to be relaxed, we want to be very free in what we're doing. But the anxiety tells us that it's something important to us. And it also puts us on this place called the edge, right? I have a theater company, and it's called Theater on the Edge. And Theater on the Edge that's what it's about. It's all about, as a performer, we always got to be on that edge of performance. It gives us this edge in our performance. And that edge means that, so as a performer, every time I perform, and let's say I'm performing on stage, and I'm backstage, and I'm about to go on to do my performance, whatever it is. Well, every single time as I'm backstage, anxiety hits, fear hits, right? I become immediately nervous about going out on stage. I do some breathing, right? Some deep breathing, because breath and oxygen moving through your body helps. So I breathe, I center myself, I remind myself what my first line is that I have to say when I go out on stage, and that's it. And then I have to get out on stage. Once I cross through on stage, once I begin the action of acting, once I cross over there and do that, then all of a sudden, it all goes away. I'm absorbed in the moment, and I'm now able to perform. But anxiety propelled me out there, and it gives me a kind of energy. And it's not that I lost the anxiety when I went out on stage, but it turns into something else. It turns into a type of energy that we as performers can now use. So, so if we think of ourselves, okay, so this border around me right now, right? I'm on camera, so I have a natural border around me. Let's think of that as my box that I'm in. Okay, so when you've heard the term like thinking outside the box. Well, a box is a metaphor for the container that is your life, meaning everything you know in your entire universe, everything you know to be true, every experience that you've had, everything you've learned, everything you've witnessed, everything in your entire life has made up of the world you know. That is what we call the known universe, and that is what's inside your box. So it's easy to think of a box as a square or a cube, depending on how you want to visualize it. It's easier to think of it that way for the example of why is that, right? So let's say this shape around me, this box that I'm in, is my known universe. But the actual universe, meaning all the experiences I've never had, exist on the outside of it. Okay, so everything I know, everything I've done in my life, everything I've witnessed, everything I've learned, experienced, all of that is inside. That's my known universe. Everything else is on the outside. Okay, so now why does that relate to anything, right? What does that got to do with acting? Well, the reason it has to do with acting is because it has to do with being an artist. And an artist's job is to create. Art is creation through expression. That's what art is. Creation through expression. Creation means to bring something anew. Now, it doesn't mean we have to think of something that's never been thought of. No, the actual creative moment is simply existing fully right here, right now. That's the true creative moment. That's what that means. Right here, right now. So, to be in the realm of creation, all I need to do is to pull all of my focus, because then I'm physically here, right? I'm always physically here. But then it's to pull all of my mental focus, anything I have to this moment, meaning I'm all in this moment. That means I have to let go of any thought that has to do with the past or any thought that has to do with the future. I'm all in this moment only. So, you'll find that most of the time you're existing here, but you're thinking of something else. You're thinking of things that have happened in the past, or you're thinking of things that will happen. Maybe things you have to do, things you're worrying about, all of that. But you're thinking about the future most of the time. Sometimes we go into the past. That's the logical mind escaping the moment. That keeps us inside the box. Anytime we're thinking about things that have to do with the box and only the box. Things that have happened, and then the logical mind uses it to take all of this stuff and run it through algorithms to try to predict what's going to happen next. That's called our survival instinct. That's what it's for. It's to keep us alive. It's trying to navigate us through life in the safest, least conflicted way possible. So now as an artist, it's like, okay, but we have to come all in, which means we have to leave the box because there's no thought in the creative moment. At least there's no logical thought. There's nothing inside the box can help us. So what we need to do is go on the outside of the box, to be in the unknown moment. The problem is that the unknown moment, if it's unknown, the logical mind can't navigate us into safety. Therefore, the unknown moment is something to be feared by the logical mind. And that's why we feel anxiety when we go anywhere in the unknown. But to go into the unknown is necessary to be an artist because art exists in that place. Creation exists out there. And then also art is creation through expression. So the way we actually channel all this and we create something in art is we do it through expressing a feeling. So again, it's not about a thought about a thing, it's about a feeling about a thing. So we use our feelings and emotions in our acting, in painting, in singing, in dancing, in all of the different art forms. It's all about a feeling, not a thought. So when we're able to step away from our thought, get into this moment, and step outside the box, we immediately feel anxiety. Because it triggers, like an alarm system, it triggers the logical mind to make us feel anxious, to make us feel afraid of what we don't know is going to happen. So this border that's around us, the box that we're in, imagine the box is lined with a security system. That security system is a type of electric fence. And it's meant to go off and to shock you when you get too close to it, too close to the border, and it's meant to keep you on the inside. Your logical mind's always trying to keep you at the center of itself, in the most safe, comfortable place it knows. The closer that we venture out to the border, the more we begin feeling that electric fence. That is the anxiety. Our job is to pass through it. That's the difficult part, because the closer we get, the stronger it feels, the more anxious it becomes. So if I'm standing backstage and I want to go on stage and perform, but all of a sudden the anxiety gets too overwhelming for me, and sometimes we see this with kids and in school acting and things like that. The anxiety gets so overwhelming they can't go on stage. It's called stage fright. And all of a sudden they can't actually go out and perform. Well, when that happens, this is our fight or flight response, which is survival of the logical mind. So we either have to go through the electric fence or we have to run away. Do we fight through it, or do we flight? Do we run away from it? Either way, we're going to resolve the anxiety. If we move away from it, we resolve the anxiety. If we go through it, we're also going to resolve the anxiety. The anxiety exists in the unknown and not knowing what's going to happen next. So if I'm standing backstage and I have this incredible anxiety, I could say I'm not going to go on and I could walk away. The anxiety will go away. Now, I'll feel bad about that. I'll have tremendous guilt about that, but the anxiety will have gone away. Or I can walk through the fence onto the stage, say my first line, and now I'm absorbed into the unknown. The anxiety also goes away because now I'm on the ride. I'm taking the journey. It becomes an energy. It becomes something else that now fuels me and guides me through the rest of the performance. So anxiety, I say all this because anxiety is not something that is bad for us. We typically have a perception of anxiety where it's something that's bad, something we need to get rid of, to let go of. And as an artist, I can tell you, no, it's something we need to channel, harness, and learn how to use. We need our anxiety to create art, but we want it to be fun. So if you think about watching like a scary movie, well, that triggers anxiety, but it does so, hopefully, in a fun way. It does it like we choose to watch the scary movie because we want to feel fear. That is proof that we like being afraid. We might go to a haunted house, right? Or something like a theme park. Like we have in Orlando, we have Universal Studios, and they have this thing called Halloween Horror Nights. And you go and you walk through these really big haunted houses, and it's all about being scared. And it's wonderful because it's safe. We go there knowing it's safe, but I still want to feel the feeling of fear. But I want to do so safely. This is why people skateboard. This is why people surf, play sports, skydive, mountain climb. All of those things have to do with we want to feel the adrenaline. We want to feel the feeling of fear. We want to feel anxiety. But we want to do so in a safe or somewhat safe environment. Because when we feel anxiety, we feel the most alive. It's a heightened sense of awareness. We are the most alive when we feel like we're closer to death. Now, it's all perceived, of course, but that's how it works. So that's why we do these things. That's why we watch a scary movie. That's why we go to a haunted house. That's why we ride a roller coaster. That's why we'll skydive. You skydive because it makes you feel like you're the most alive because there's the unknown factor of what's going to happen. So it triggers that. So acting does that too. Really, all of the art forms can. But acting can do that because as an actor, we're also letting go of thought. We're stepping into that unknown moment. We're allowing ourselves to just be taken. And when we do that, acting becomes a type of extreme sport because it makes us feel alive. And especially stage acting. Stage acting is amazing. I love theater. Because there's nothing like being on stage in front of a live audience, knowing that there is no second take. We're not going to stop this and redo it. Whatever happens, happens. The show must go on. It's an amazing, amazing experience. Okay, so I have some questions that were given to me They were sent in, and I want to start getting to some of those questions. But again, if any of you are online with me and have any questions or thoughts, please, by all means, interact with us. I'd love to hear from you directly. But let's go to the first question, and that is, how can I turn anxiety into fuel to go after my dreams in a practical way? So this is where training comes in, because as what I train in our school, much of the training, especially in the first year of training, is about this exact thing. It's about anxiety. It's about learning how to deal with it, learning how to channel it, and then just work through it. But first we learn, and we do this in so we have our semesters, we have semesters, and semesters are like 4 months in length, very similar to a university. And we teach twice a week, so they're very intensive. It's about 100 hours of training each semester. And in that training, much of it is learning about yourself, you as a human being, how you navigate, how you function, and then how you can go ahead and then use that as an artist. So how we learn, how we turn anxiety into fuel, is we train for it. We actually train on anxiety, and we learn, the first things we learn in our program is putting all of your focus outward. Because really, we get a lot of fear when we're inward focused, and we get stopping fear. When I say stopping fear, I mean the type of anxiety that stops us from doing something. When we're inward focused, we're in our head, we're thinking all the time, and we become very self-critical and very self-judgmental. And those things can stop us from performing. But if I can learn how to put all of my focus outward, that's what I was talking about a little bit before, about taking all of your focus, like a sheer act of will, and being in this moment, right here, right now. If I can do that, then I can work through it in the most practical way possible. And this is for any of the art forms. Any of the art forms we can do this for. But definitely for acting, we need to be in this moment. So that's it. It's training, training, training in this way, in this thing called outward focus. We have exercises that we use. We call one the core exercise, because it's really our central, at the core of everything we do, and it's all about existing in the present moment and working off of what is actually happening. Not what we think should be happening, but what is really happening in the moment, right here, right now. So that's the best way to do it, is to find a program, like ours or another type of conservatory that really goes into that depth and that will hone your skills into existing in a present moment. All right, let's go on to the next question. What is the best way to deal with self-consciousness while on stage or on camera? So, I think I've talked about this a little bit, but self-consciousness is a form of anxiety. We are thinking about the self. We're worried about how we are sounding, looking, appearing, performing. Like, we're worried about us. So we're very conscious of ourself, which means we are inward focused. Sanford Meisner, who's one of our mentors, and it's the approach we teach at the studio, but Sanford Meisner, when he was teaching, said that all actors are self-conscious. All people are self-conscious, but all actors are very self-conscious about what they're doing. But the self-consciousness, because they have that, it pulls them inward, and then it breaks the connection with their partner. So because they're self-conscious, they're not really listening and reacting to what's happening in the scene. And so he says, well, that's what we need to solve. We first need to solve that thing, that thread between two people. We need to be able to connect that back in, and then we can perform. So he says we have to resolve the self-consciousness. And the way he did that was through a series of exercises of outward focus. Because if we can learn how to if I can take all of my attention and put it on you, and just totally on you, I mean, not who I think you are, but the you that's sitting in front of me right now. And we just work on that over, and I just work off of what you're giving me and what is happening with you and how you're feeling and all of that stuff. Well, then the more I'm focused on you, the less I'm focused on me. And that will now allow me to navigate through that self consciousness. I can't be self conscious if I'm not focused on the self. I can only be self conscious if I'm conscious of the self. But if I'm conscious of you and only you, then that will alleviate what's happening over here. So that's one of the ways that we look to deal with that. I had a question in the chat. I'd like to get to that next. It says, do you recommend learning lines by rote to feel less anxious on stage or in front of the camera? Yes, absolutely. So learning lines by rote, what that means is, so Sanford Meisner taught this, and he says an actor should make sure that when you learn the words, you're only learning the sequence of the words. We're not learning words with any sort of emotion or context built into it. But as an actor, what we want to do is we want to learn the words, what's considered flat, fast and flat. That's it. So in other words, we're stripping out any way that we would say it. We're stripping out the how. And we're only learning the what. We're only learning what the words are. So when I teach it, I say we're just learn the sequence of the words only. Now, this is much more difficult in memorization, of course. It's much easier to learn, to memorize in context, meaning with inflection or with meaning or with feeling. But when you say words very, very fast and flatten them out, which is called learning by rote, you flatten them out as much as you can. What that does is it puts the words inside of you, but then allows you to use them however you need when you are acting either on stage or in front of the camera. It gives you flexibility. But if I learn a line, let's say the line was, why did you do that? Right? And if I learn it with like emotion, like, why did you do that? Right? That has a lot of inflection and emotion. Why did you do that? And I say that over and over. Why did you do that? In that same way. Why did you do that? Right? It becomes almost monotonous. I'm pre-planning how I'm going to say that line. Well, what it does is it strips away any life out of the line. I've already decided ahead of time how that line needs to be said. Therefore, it doesn't matter what my partner does. It doesn't even matter what's happening around me. I've already made the decision. This is how I'm going to say the line. And so it comes across as false, and it actually gives the actor more anxiety because we know it's false. And then anything that happens that might be slightly different, let's say my partner delivers their line a little bit different, it throws me off. It puts me right in my head. Or let's say I say my line, instead of, why did you do that? Why did you, like if I stumble, it puts me in my head. Anything that happens puts me in my head. When we learn lines with all of that built into it, it adds more anxiety and fear to the actor. It gets in our way. So Meisner said, in order to keep our outward focus, we need to be able to use the words of the script however we need to in the moment, meaning we're not deciding ahead of time. So when I learn the lines, it says, why did you do that? Why did you do that? Why did you do that? It's like very fast. I say, why did you do that? Why did you do that? I learn them very fast and flat. So then in the moment, who knows how I'm going to say it? Right? Why did you do that? Right? I could say it in so many different ways. But it's going to come out at the moment of what's actually happening, which will make the performance feel alive. And that's really, really critical. So yes, learn your lines fast and flat. Do it over and over and over. Memorization is something that it takes a long time to do because there's initial memorization, which is short-term memory. You can learn very quickly, right? I can learn 10 script pages a day in short-term memory. It's a lot, but that's not where I need to be. It will take me another few weeks to go from short-term memory into what we call instinctive memory, which is where I need to work from. Because the goal as the actor is to be able to say the words of the script, say my next line without ever thinking about what my next line is. It's by instinct. I know what to say based on what's happening around me. You're telling me something and I have a reaction that comes back with my line. But if I'm thinking about what's my next line, I'm in my actor thought. And that will cut the thread between us. It will cut the connection. And it will immediately show the audience that this is not real, that this is false. So give yourself, the biggest thing, have a tremendous amount of patience when it comes to memorization, and you cannot over-memorize. So do it every day. I try to tell my actors every single day, be memorizing. Even if you think you know it, run them as fast as you can, flat as you can. You can't ever over-memorize. And then that will give you tremendous freedom on stage or in front of the camera. Okay, so moving on to the next question. What are some ways to de-stress yourself right before a play or acting in a scene? So de-stress. Okay, so we talked about earlier how anxiety is the feeling of fear and stress is something else. So what is stress? Well, stress can be, to try to break it down into its most simplest form. Stress is the feeling of obligation of having to do something you don't want to do. And I'm going to type that in the chat real quick. Stress is the feeling of obligation of having to do something you don't want to do. And here, I'm going to put that over here on YouTube as well. So what do I mean by that? It's like, okay, well, exactly what it says. When you feel obligated to have to do something, but you'd rather be doing something else, you don't want to be doing what you're doing, it creates this thing called stress. Stress can be very harmful because it's your logical mind at odds with your emotional core. This is what we call the duality. And I have other videos on the duality of the human psyche, and I highly recommend watching one of those to really understand this. But your logical mind and your emotional core, the emotional core is who you really truly are. Your logical mind is that AI computer system you have that is trying to help you navigate life. It's your onboard navigation system. And that's your logical mind. However, we sometimes hear thoughts in our own voice coming from our logical mind. Any negative thought that you have about yourself, any negative self-thought or kind of judgmental thought you have comes from your logical mind, not your emotional core, and is actually not you. I know you hear it in your voice, but it's actually not you. It's your logical mind reflecting back whatever that sentiment is from someone in your past where you learned it. Someone told you that, or maybe a group of people have told you that over time, and your logical mind simply reflects it back to you, says it back to you, to help you navigate away from repeating a similar feeling of experience. So that's really what all of that is. So stress is the feeling of obligation of having to do something you don't want to do. And typically we do things we don't want to do when we feel obligated. And we're feeling obligated from our logical mind. For example, let's say you are in, let's say if any of you have known anyone, if you haven't been there yourself, but maybe you've known someone that has had a job they've hated, right? If you're in a job you hate, I'm not talking one that's like, I wish I was doing something else. I mean, no, like a really toxic environment job you hate. If you've ever been in that, the thing that immediately you wonder is, well, why is this person in this job? They hate it so much. It's toxic. Why would you stay in an environment or a relationship that is toxic to you? But we do so out of obligation, either obligation of loyalty, obligation of money. Many times job is, well, I need the money. So, okay, so there's an obligation to, you need to make money because safety is more important to you than how you feel. Maybe there's an obligation of following through on something. There's an obligation to a person. Who knows? But there's some form of obligation that keeps you going, even though emotionally, your emotional core, which is your desire and your love center, is trying to tell you, no, I want to do something else, or I want to quit this job, or I need to have this conversation with this person. Whatever it may be, you emotionally want to do one thing, but then you choose out of obligation to do something else. And the choice out of obligation, since it comes from your logical mind, is based in fear. So you have a desire to do something. Let's say you have a desire to quit your job, but then you choose logically not to because of the fear of lack of money. Well, because of fear, you stayed obligated to this thing that you didn't want to do, and because of that, you feel bad about it because you cowered away from what you wanted to do. You allowed fear to stop you. Right? You fight or flight, and you ran. So when that happens, we feel like a coward. We feel not good enough. Stress is formed when you beat yourself up from the inside. You create tension on the inside of your body from the feeling of not being good enough. You actually attack yourself. It's all unconscious, but your muscular system, your circulatory system, your nervous system, it all gets attacked. It's tension, and you feel the tension, especially in your upper body, especially in your shoulders, in your neck, in your jawline. You feel all of that tension. It feels like a weight that is on top of you. That is stress. And as I said before, much different than anxiety. Much different than anxiety. So, to de-stress yourself, right? Because we don't want to lower the anxiety, but if we are feeling a little stressed, or if we're feeling just out of sorts, or even if we're over anxious, things like that, right before a scene, the biggest thing to do is breathe. I know that sounds funny because it's like we're always breathing. It's like, no, we actually hold our breath when we're stressed or when we're super anxious. So to take a deep breath through the mouth, not through the nose, but through the mouth, because what I want to do is I want to move as much oxygen through my body as possible. So, right, deep breath. Take like 3 deep breaths through the mouth, move a tremendous amount of oxygen through your body. What that does is when you move a lot of oxygen through your body, it calms everything down. It allows your brain to focus. It gives you just a moment of calm than to go out on stage and do what you need to do. Now, why not a nose breath? Well, a nose breath is a thinking breath. We do that when we need more thought. We do that when we want to calm ourselves down. As an actor, we don't want to calm ourselves down. We want our anxiety, but we want to center ourselves. So a mouth breath will center you, will ground you into the moment without taking everything away or moving into thought. So that's the best way to go ahead and do that. Just breathe. Believe it or not, it makes a huge difference. So, okay, another question we have in the chat. If you are preparing for an audition and you don't have time to learn the lines, should you learn them as well as you can or focus on other things? That's a great question. And so here's the thing. With an audition, now there's different types of auditions. If you're going to an in-person audition and it's a cold read, and a cold read means when you show up for the audition, they hand you the material like 10 to 15 minutes prior to you auditioning. It's called a cold read audition. Don't memorize the words. Use the script. You're going to actually go in and you're going to hold the script in your hand and you're going to use it in the audition. Much more important, you only have 10 or 15 minutes, much more important to focus on other things like circumstances, relationship, what's happening in the scene, what are you fighting for, things like that. Now, if you have something called a prepared read where they send you material ahead of time, maybe a couple days ahead of time or sometimes even more, then do your best to learn the words. Now, you can still hold the script when you're performing. I always recommend to actors, always hold the material. just in case, because you don't want to drop out of the life if you know. And sometimes in the middle of performing, we forget where we are. Well, it's right here. We can glance at it, grab it, move forward. So always hold the material, but yes, then spend the time on memorization. Also, if you're doing what we call a self-tape audition, which is when they ask you to record yourself to the audition and then send it in, it's best if you can do a little bit of memorization there as well. Now, again, you can still hold the script, or you could even put it right here off frame, right? I can still like glance at it and grab it if I need to, or right under the frame. You know, that's the neat thing about self-tape is you can still put things outside of the box, but still be really familiar with it. It's best to memorize when you have time to, and then when you don't have time to, by all means, use the script. But the more important things than memorization are going to be figuring out what the relationship is between you and the other person or people in the scene, figuring out where you're emotionally coming from, meaning what is your emotional state leading into the scene, and then figuring out what do you need, what are you fighting for in this moment, what must you get by having whatever conversation you're having, by being in this room, by being in this environment, what do you need? And those are kind of the choices that you need to make before doing any sort of audition, and that will really help if you can answer those questions. That really helps you connect in with your partner and do what you have to do. All right, let me see. Let me move on. Let me see. What is the next question? Okay, so the next one: will my anxiety stop me from acting? I get very nervous in front of others. And the short answer is no, your anxiety will not stop you from acting. In fact, most actors are introverts, and introverts with some form of social anxiety. It's a very common thing among actors. Now, not all actors are that way, but many actors are. And it does not stop them from doing that because you still learn a process. The process of acting allows you to work through. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to get, by learning how to act, it doesn't mean you're still going to all of a sudden love going to parties and doing other social functions. Not at all. But you don't need to do that. You can still, be very introverted in life, and it's okay to feel those anxieties from time to time. It's very normal too. But you can also at the same time allow yourself to work through them in your acting, within the scene, within the character, all of those things. And a strong process in acting will absolutely help you through that. So just train, train, train. All right, I have time for just one or two more. Let's see. Any tips on how to control anxiety before an audition? And that's kind of what I was just talking about, is just breathe. That's what I recommend before doing, especially auditioning. Auditioning is it's normal to be anxious, even overly anxious before an audition. It's an uncomfortable thing for actors to do. So just breathe. Give yourself some nice deep breaths. Remind yourself that, right, there's no real danger to the audition. Nothing's going to harm you in the audition. And then also, I like to give myself an outward focused thing to do when I'm auditioning. Meaning, instead of worrying about me, I'm going to worry about the script and what I need to do there. And I also even think about what am I going to do when I walk into the room? And one of the things I like to do is I want to make the people in the room feel comfortable. So if I'm making them comfortable, I'm less worried about making myself feel comfortable. So you see, I'm taking the focus off of me and I'm putting it out there. So I go in with this, what we call a doing, or with an action. And so I'm going to walk in the room and I'm going to make them feel comfortable. And then that simple switch allows me to reduce the anxiety that would tend to stop me from doing it, right? That level of anxiety that wants me to do fight or flight. It allows me to work past that. And I still feel the anxiety of the character and in the moment, but I don't have the anxiety of the actor that makes me want to run the other way. So that can help. All right, let me do one more. So this is simply, what is stage fright and how can I deal with it? And stage fright is simply that moment of anxiety before you go on stage. That's all it is. And it happens because when you're right before you're going to go on stage, you are standing at the edge of your box, right? You're right here on the borders, and you're about to go cross the border, which is like on the stage. And so you're the most anxious because you're standing right on top of that electric fence. And so that's what stage fright is. It hits you, and it's very, very strong. You deal with it by, again, by breathing. And what I do, which really helps, focus on either the first thing you have to do when you enter stage or the first line, like whatever comes first. Sometimes it's an action, sometimes it's a line. But you focus on, okay, I got to walk onto stage and do what? Sometimes it's walk on the stage and I have to say these words. Great. Then I just focus, what is my first line? Because I know if I can walk out on stage and say that, I'll be taken into this other energy. Or if I have to walk out on stage and I have to pick something up. Great. If I can walk out and pick it up, I'm good. I'm now absorbed into the living moment, into the creative acting moment. So that's really what I do. Breathe, focus on my first line, walk on stage, cross through that border. And then it takes me every single time. Once I'm there, it takes me. As long as I stay outward focused, because we only feel the fear again, because people will have it when you're, sometimes you can have it again when you're on stage. And that happens, you're in the middle of a scene and you think logically. You allow your logical mind to engage again. And you start thinking about your words, you start thinking about a monologue you have that's coming up or something else that's outside at the moment. And again, you start getting that anxiety again. So you just have to remind yourself, right, outward focus, right here, right now. And then I put my focus back outward, and then it goes away again. So that's the best thing you can do for that. Okay, I think we've just about reached the end of our session for today, but I really thank you all for being with us today, and thank you for the questions in the chat. I appreciate that. If you have any other questions, you can reach out to us. You can send us an email right here at info@truthfulacting.com, or you can call or text us at that number below, right there. You can call or text us there. You'll most likely you'll reach Samantha, and she's the one that kind of handles all intake and questions coming in. If there's anything that needs to be passed on to me, she'll pass it on to me and I can answer it. We really want to be here as a support mechanism for the industry. So if you have any other questions, sometimes we get off of these sessions and then it's like, oh, I wish I would have asked that. Great, send it to me in a text or in an email, and I'll get back to you on that. And then we'll be back here in a few weeks as well. And we'll be doing another one of these on a new topic, and I'll be sending that out to everyone soon, what that topic is going to be and when that will be. But until then, I really appreciate you all taking the time to be with me today. I love discussing these various topics. Love, love, love it. And we'll be back soon, and I'll see you all then. All right. Thanks, everyone.